Macrinus, the man who was never supposed to be emperor, the man who murdered the previous emperor to take the throne, the man known as the Black Emperor. But was he really black? Like many say he was. Was Denzel Washington the correct choice to play him? I mean, you're watching this video, you're interested in Macrinus, so what do you think?
It doesn't matter what you think!
It really doesn't. It doesn't. Black, not black, who cares? Unfortunately, his title as Black Emperor is kind of the main reason Macrinus stands out as an emperor today, even though I think it's much more interesting that he once punished two men by cutting two bulls in half, sewing the men into one bull each, with their head poking out the bull's ass, and then the two men remained there, bull ass, face to face, so that they can talk to each other and contemplate on what they did wrong.
Brother,
I think Macrinus stands out because his other favorite method of punishing people was killing one and then chaining the second offender to the corpse so that the second offender would slowly die due to being exposed to the rot and decay of the first. Or the fact that Macrinus was the first Chad Roman emperor who was never a member of the Nerd Senate. Those are things that Macrinus did, that he represented, that the Romans cared about, but his skin color?
I'm here to tell you right now, we don't care.
Let me tell you something.
We don't care.
The Romans preferred discriminating people for their gender, their status, or their nationality.
Let me tell you.
So when it comes to Macrinus, the only thing that mattered was that he was born in Roman territory to Phoenician and Berber parents. And to be exact, he was born in Mauritania, modern-day Algeria, aka northwestern Africa, aka a country whose land is mostly in the Sahara on some real dune thing. And since yours truly right here actually once got his Lisan al-Khaib on and spent the weekend with Berber people in the Sahara, sleeping in the open tent out in the desert, which honestly was absolutely beautiful and something I'll never forget. So I think of these Berber that I spent that desert night with when talking about Macrinus Sahara's Berber origin. And so for this video, Macrinus shall be depicted like my Berber brothers from the desert back then. And so, the story of the future Kaiser Macrinus appropriately starts in a city called Caesarea in 165 AD, where he was born to a woman. At least we still agree on that. Give us some time. Skin color disputes of historic people are only the beginning. In a couple of years, people will start claiming the gender of historic mothers. The exact identity of Mama Macrinus remains unknown to us because the only historic splash Macrinus' parents made worth noting was Papa Macrinus splashing into Mama Macrinus. The only other thing we know about them is that they had enough money to afford a good education for their boy, which allowed Macrinus to leave Caesarea and become a lawyer in Rome to get his Harry Specter on. At that time, the emperor of Rome was Septimius Severus, who was also born in Africa and is another controversial candidate for the title of Black Emperor, but that's another video. One of Severus's close friends was also the man helping him administer the empire, and that friend was a man who went by the name of Gaius Flavius Plautianus. While doing the administering, Plautianus was of course aware of any man of the law making a splash in his city, and Macrinus' reputation as a lawyer preceded him, so Plautianus hired Macrinus to assist him with the administrative work he was doing for the emperor, aka Macrinus, who wasn't even from around Rome and had no significant ties to the higher class, suddenly found himself working more or less directly for the Emperor of Rome, and the man who got him the gig, Plautianus, wasn't just an administrator and a friend of the emperor. Nah, he was more than that.
His family.
Plautianus' daughter, Plautilla, was married to the emperor's son, Caracalla. So Macrinus' new boss, Plautianus, was a man of serious reputation and power and a part of Emperor Severus' family, which is why he obviously tried to kill Emperor Severus. Plautianus tried to kill the emperor, tried to kill the emperor's wife, Julia Domna, and the emperor's son, Caracalla, because Plautianus was
family.
Yeah, if you know anything about Rome, you saw this coming from a mile away the moment I said Plautianus had reputation and power, because in Rome, those two words, reputation, power, just short code for an emperor assassin in the making. But to be fair, Plautianus actually had legit honorable cause for his desire to end the emperor's family. Let me explain. The fact that men of reputation and power are threats to the emperor is not something we learned in hindsight. Everybody in ancient Rome already knew that the life expectancy of emperors usually isn't very long and that their most common cause of death is other men with power and reputation. So Emperor Severus's wife, Julia Domna, was aware of that too, and she, quietly from the shadows, started to plot to undermine Plautianus's power and try to ruin his reputation. And in return, Plautianus tried to undermine Julia Domna's power and ruin her reputation, only he didn't exactly operate from the shadows. This dude just straight up kidnapped and tortured Julia Domna's servants and friends so that they give him some dirt against the emperor's family. And unsurprisingly, the emperor's family eventually found out about that. To be precise, the emperor's son, Caracalla, found out, and once he learned that Plautianus is threatening his mother, Caracalla made it publicly known that once he claims his birthright and succeeds his father as the emperor of Rome, he, Caracalla, will kill Plautianus's daughter, Plautilla. Which, don't forget, that daughter Plautilla was also Caracalla's wife. So Caracalla said, yo, I'm gonna kill my wife when I'm emperor, because
Family.
but not with Papa Plautianus. Once Caracalla publicly threatened his daughter, Plautianus was like,
If you let my daughter go now, that'll be the end of it. I will not look for you. I will not pursue you. But if you don't, I will look for you. I will find you. And I will kill you.
Plautianus was ready to go deep into the Roman Game of Thrones and take the entire emperor family down. But, I mean, you know how it goes.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win, or you die.
And Plautianus, he found himself on the dying side. In the year 205, Severus had enough proof of Plautianus's treachery that he had him publicly executed. Now, Macrinus was just some lawyer from out of Rome, an outsider that was not from a noble family, came to the big city and found his way into politics only thanks to the now freshly executed Plautianus, who considered Macrinus as his right-hand man, which means that right now, my man Macrinus, he was like, no, wait. And 9 out of 10 times, when someone important gets executed for treachery in Rome, all the people who work closely with that person, they get killed too, unless they have someone seriously important to vouch for them. For example, Plautianus' daughter and wife, they were strangled to death after Plautianus was executed. But Macrinus, man, obviously, this video is about him. He survived. He was so good at his job and helped so many people as a lawyer that he got support from a powerful man whose name I will spare you because it's very long and completely irrelevant. All you need to know is Macrinus lucked the F out, was off the hook, and so good at doing all that boring administration stuff that the emperor actually hired Macrinus to administer his private estates now, and also administer a very important trading route leading out of Rome. And then Macrinus, he was so good at that he was appointed the financial officer of Roman provinces, meaning he reported back to the emperor directly to make sure the governors of these provinces aren't stealing money from the empire. And I know what you're thinking now. Taxes? Administration? Trading routes? What the hell is this stuff? And where's my briefed video? Where's the blood? Where's the violence? Where's the incest?
I don't want peace. I want problems, always.
And hey, all I can tell you is,
Daddy, chill.
we're getting there. Because now, after all this time as a glorified accountant, Macrinus was finally appointed to the position of Praetorian Prefect of the Praetorian Guard, which nowadays best translates to he was the commander of the emperor's bodyguards, aka he was now a military commander, aka violence.
Yes!
And Macrinus was good at violence. Ooh, that boy was good at violence. See, while he was doing all the boring administrating and accounting and getting rich, he was living the good life in private, you know, wife, kids, the house with the fence, the slaves with no rights, the usual. And Macrinus had such a fine touch with his slaves that they infamously called him the butcher. Because whenever slaves made a mistake, Macrinus was like, so you forgot to mow the lawn, huh? Know that. Remember that. Macrinus the Butcher. And the Butcher was now one of the top dogs in the army as Praetorian Prefect. By this time, in 211, Caracalla had also succeeded his father to the throne and was now Rome's co-emperor along with his brother Geta. But after a couple of months, Caracalla stabbed his brother Geta to death while they were hanging out at their mom's house so that Caracalla can rule alone. Yeah, Caracalla was also a violent man. And like his father before him, now sole emperor Caracalla, continued to value Macrinus' skill and kept him close as the prefect. So close that when Emperor Caracalla went to war against the Parthian emperor in 213, he took Macrinus with him. Just two violent men playing a violent man's game, war. And as a violent man, Emperor Caracalla also knew how to handle other violent men. Paid them. So he doubled the salary of the Roman soldiers, all of them, and they absolutely loved him for it.
What did I say? Tell them to bring me my money.
So much so that to the soldiers, Caracalla wasn't just some Roman emperor, he was a Broman emperor. He was a Roman emperor. I was going to do a whole thug life, but I had to laugh, man. Sorry. So with the love of his soldiers in his back and Macrinus at his side, Caracalla led the campaign against Parthia over the next 4 years. And for a while, Rome actually dominated Parthia, massacred their entire northern region, which would be today's Iran, by the way. And Caracalla laid claim to the disputed lands that Rome and Parthia were fighting over. So it was going well, and in this war campaign, Macrinus was also starting to make a name for himself. Even though he had a higher position than any soldier, Macrinus still fought alongside the troops and even fought enemy generals and duels. Macrinus put his life on the line with the guys, so to the soldiers, he wasn't just a Roman prefect, he was a perfect Broman. His soldiers loved Broman Macrinus, and those that didn't love him were sewn into bull corpses with their heads sticking out the bull's ass. I feel like this needs context. One day, Macrinus found out that some of his soldiers were forcing themselves on the slave girls, and he didn't like that, so he punished the men by forcing their heads into and through a bull's ass. 2 bull asses, actually. He cut 2 bulls in half, sewed the men inside, squeezed the head out the back door, and let them dwell there to reflect on their action. Macrinus, the former slave butcher, sticking up for the slave girl.
Look at us. Look at us. Huh? Who would have thought? Not me.
So Macrinus ruled his soldiers with the same mentality he had ruled his slaves, and with that iron grip and discipline, Macrinus gained even more respect, and eventually Macrinus had himself quite a bit of reputation and power. And you remember what I told you about men in Rome with reputation and power. You remember the most common cause of death for emperors. Yes, Macrinus was starting to look like a problem to Emperor Caracalla, a guy who was so power-hungry that he had killed his own brother in front of their mother, only to not share the throne. So yeah, once Emperor Caracalla realized that Macrinus was becoming powerful, the emperor was like, and the emperor started to plot on how to kill Macrinus. This was all going down in 217, while they were still out at war in foreign lands, at this point 4 years into the war, meaning their war camps, they had long become settlements, homes away from home, and the Roman army, they were just living their life when not fighting, comfortably enough that they had enough time for interior politics and assassination plots. But Macrinus' reputation and power was not just for show. He had enough men loyal to him that he found out about the emperor's plot to kill him, and he told all would-be assassins,
"Whatever their price, I'll beat it. I like living."
And remember, Caracalla originally bought these soldiers' love by doubling their salary. Their loyalty could absolutely be bought by the highest bidder. So Macrinus found a taker in the soldier Julius Martialis, a soldier who kind of had beef with Caracalla anyway because the emperor executed Martialis' brother. So Martialis became Macrinus' hired assassin, and on April 8th, 217, when Caracalla strolled outside the settlement to take a leak, Martialis stabbed the emperor to death. And when Martialis went to get his payment from Macrinus for a job well done, Macrinus was like,
I've never met this man in my life.
Macrinus, man, he put on a better performance than Denzel did in Gladiator 2, acting all shocked that someone killed his dear friend, the Emperor Caracalla, and Macrinus had the Emperor's murderer, Martialis, executed on the spot. At the time of his death, Caracalla was 29 and had no children. Also, he died while out at war in a war camp filled with troops, which that meant that the military were the first to know that the Roman emperor was dead. They knew before the Senate in Rome did, and so they were in a prime position to put forward a new emperor before the Senate could even make a move. As a man of significant reputation and power, and the man who brought justice to Caracalla's murderer, Macrinus was now on the short list to become emperor himself. But he was like, me? Who, me? Emperor? I could never. No, stop it. Stop. Hey, Julius, I told you. Hey, Gaius, Flavius, all you guys, stop it now. Marcus, I told you to stop it. I could never do that. No, you would have to back me. And even if you backed me, I wouldn't. Only if I have to. Well, it turns out he had to. Because the other guy on that short list, Macrinus' co-prefect Adventus, was super old and never held any administrative position, so he refused the title of emperor, and Macrinus then decided to reluctantly do it, take the gig. Basically, Macrinus pulled a move straight out of the Augustus Pimp Manual of Reluctant Emperors. So then, on April 11th, 217, away from Rome and away from the Senate, Macrinus was crowned out at war by his army and rewarded the title Caesar Imperator Severus Pius Felix Augustus Proconsul, aka Emperor of Rome. And you have to know that usually the Senate in Rome, they decide that you're the actual emperor and they crown you in Rome. But the senators were also a bunch of nerds in Rome who were like,
knowledge is power.
And Macrinus was a military Chad, and the emperor's former men actually selected and respected Macrinus, so he was like,
Power is power.
there was nothing the Senate could do. Macrinus was too powerful, and he didn't even wait for the Senate to make a decision. He just sent a letter to Rome informing them of his new job title and that this is how things are now. The Senate actually wasn't really all that pissed though, because they were just glad anybody but Caracalla was emperor now, because Caracalla wasn't exactly popular with anyone but his overpaid army. His wages for these soldiers bled Rome's economy dry, and that's an understatement. Caracalla literally made everyone living in Rome a citizen just so he can collect taxes from them and use those taxes to pay the army more, double their salary, and then pay them bonuses on top. The dude was not administering nor ruling Rome at all. He just wanted to be loved by violent men, and he tried his best at also being a violent man himself, hence the whole killing the co-emperor, his brother, in front of their mother thing. And that's just a couple of the reasons why the Senate wanted Caracalla gone and why they were happy once he was dead. But huge Kardashian incoming here. Caracalla still came from a powerful noble family, and they were not happy that he was gone. In fact, Caracalla's mom, Julia Domna, the former wife of the emperor, she kind of suspected that Macrinus was involved in her son's death. And at this point, I have to remind you again that Macrinus was not of noble birth, never a member of the Senate. This was unheard of for an emperor, and only the dislike for Caracalla and the confusion and circumstance in which Macrinus inherited the title of emperor made his ascension even possible. But once the dust of that circumstance settled and gave away the reality of Macrinus actually now being the emperor, Macrinus became a problem to the nobles and everyone who had something to say. And he knew it, so he got rid of them. Macrinus decided that his buddies of similar non-noble upbringing can and should hold all the important positions in Rome now, not the nobles who filled their own pockets and watched Caracalla bleed the empire dry. Nah, Macrinus appointed men who came from the real world and lived a real life, like Macrinus himself, and he kept it real so hard that he even appointed a man that was illiterate to be governor. And then, to keep it even realer, Macrinus executed all those he just stripped of their jobs. People from noble families, he executed them by having them fight to the death in the arena for the entertainment of the mob and peasants whose taxes they had been stealing. Say what you will, but Macrinus, he kept it real. And so this is why I want to welcome you to another episode of
When Keeping It Real Goes Wrong.
Macrinus basically took the throne and went on a witch hunt against the noble families that controlled that throne. So unsurprisingly, those noble families, they had a major problem with that. And former Emperor Caracalla's mother, Julia Domna, used that growing dislike against Macrinus amongst the nobles to make her move against him. Oh, and you should know that the second most common death for emperors is angry, powerful women. Just by the way, Macrinus knew that, of course, and he was well aware of the threat that Julia Domna represented, so he sent her into exile where she starved to death. But another huge Kardashian lurking around the corner here, Julia Domna, had already made her move. Before she died, Julia Domna made her sister Julia Mesa swear that she will make sure Macrinus dies, aka the curse of Julia Domna lived. It was on Macrinus. But for now, still in the year 217 and just a couple of months into his reign, Macrinus also still had a war to deal with. Remember, he wasn't in Rome. Emperor Macrinus, the Roman emperor, was still out at war fighting against the Parthian Empire, and eventually the Parthian king, Artabanus, got wind that Caracalla had died, and he knew a time of succession is a time of confusion, so he used that time to launch a counterattack against Rome, a counterattack that overwhelmed Emperor Macrinus, who was already overwhelmed with the whole "I'm the new emperor" thing going on. So Macrinus decided that he can't focus on these two wars at once. There was a political war to be fought in Rome and a traditional war on the front lines. Macrinus decided that the political war in Rome was more important and that his job as an emperor was to fix the economy that Caracalla broke. That meant that he had to make peace with Parthia, and to settle that conflict quickly, he agreed to pay them 50 million denarii, hand back Caracalla's spoils of war and his hostages. This was a mistake. It pissed the Roman soldiers off big time. They had spent years in this war, fighting for the emperor, fighting for Caracalla's vision, and now Macrinus settles for peace with the enemy in a war they were winning. He signs a peace treaty that benefits Parthia, pays the men who killed their brothers, and returns the killers.
Unforgivable.
Macrinus had disrespected all those who died in the war, disrespected the memory of the soldiers' beloved Caracalla, and thus he managed to lose the respect of the army. And he wasn't even done yet. It got worse. Macrinus still had to fix the massive debt that Caracalla left the Roman Empire in, most of which was due to him overpaying the army. Remember how I told you he made every person a Roman citizen so they can pay taxes and he can use those to double the salary of the army? That massively inflated the Roman currency and turned it into monopoly money. Caracalla had screwed things up big time, and Macrinus had to fix them. So amongst other things, he cut all bonuses for existing soldiers and drastically lowered the salary of all new soldiers. This didn't exactly make Macrinus more popular with the army, but you have to know that Macrinus tried good things here. Drastically lowering the military spending was necessary. And he then lowered the value of each denarii by reducing its silver content, because he thought it would be a good idea, but it actually backfired and made inflation even worse. And then he tried to take other measures to stabilize the economy without raising taxes, like most emperors or nobles would. So the man was doing the people of Rome a solid here. But it's not like soldiers cared about that. They wanted their money. You don't mess with the money. You never touch the money. To them, Macrinus, he wasn't one of the boys anymore. They started to turn against Macrinus. But they must have forgot who they were up against. The butcher himself, who puts faces in asses.
That came out wrong. Or did it?
But you already know the story about the bulls. Well, here's another story, another way that Macrinus dished out punishment. Any soldier who had a problem with him was killed, and the next soldier who had a problem with that was chained to the corpse of his fellow brother in arms, shackled to the corpse long enough so that he died by slow exposure to decay and rot. Macrinus was a bad man, but still he couldn't get the army's respect back. And this is exactly when Julia Domna's curse took hold. Her sister, Julia Mesa, knew how much the army had loved Caracalla and how they were turning on Macrinus. And mind you, Macrinus was still out of war. The Roman Emperor still hadn't set a foot in Rome. He was still out in the war camp, still surrounded by the military, still living out there. So for him, what they thought of him not only mattered, it was a matter of life and death. And in order to make them like him again, Macrinus officially declared that Caracalla to be a new Roman deity. And that is exactly when Julia Mesa came up with a stroke of genius. Julia Mesa had 2 daughters, 2 more Julias, because why change up family tradition? Why not just call every girl Julia? Sure. And one of her Julia daughters had a young child of 14 years. And since DNA tests weren't exactly a thing back then, Julia Mesa just told everybody that her daughter was pregnant with former emperor and now new god Caracalla's child, a boy she named Elagabalus. Note that Caracalla was 29 when he died and this child was 14, so unless 15-year-old Caracalla impregnated his then 23-year-old cousin, probably not his son. But also, if he impregnated her, that wouldn't be the weirdest thing to happen in Rome at the time. But it didn't matter who Elagabalus' actual father was. The man of the army. They wanted the child to be Caracalla's son. They wanted to love Elagabalus. And the irony is that in his attempts to keep the army's favor by declaring Caracalla a deity, Macrinus had literally given his enemies the perfect alley-oop in creating a divine competitor for the throne of Rome. As the perceived demigod son of Caracalla, 14-year-old Elagabalus immediately had the army on his side. They wanted to believe he was Caracalla's son so bad that they spread the rumors themselves, and as rumors grew, it became fact, and many flocked. Thousands flocked to this 14-year-old boy, and on May 16, 218, the Gallic Legion officially declared Elagabalus as their rightful emperor. The empire was officially divided. Well, the army was, but again, all of it, is still taking place away from Rome and being decided entirely amongst the military that's still out at war. Macrinus had a big problem now, and he decided to solve it the same way he solved the Caracalla situation. He dispatched some troops to go and kill the 14-year-old Elagabalus and his rebel army. But those troops, they were more loyal to dead god Caracalla and his demigod son than they were to pay decreasing enemy treaty-making corpse-rotting face-to-ass pudding snitch Macrinus, so they just deflected over to Elagabalus' side. This left Macrinus completely out of options. He had neither the support of the army, nor the nobles, nor the Senate, since they actually never met their emperor who never set foot in Rome. And so with what little men he had left loyal to him, on June 8, 218, Macrinus went for Hail Mary, fighting Elagabalus' army in the Battle of Antioch. But he was defeated and deserted the battlefield. So as suddenly and unexpectedly and as cowardly as his reign started, it ended the same way. Just 14 months after becoming emperor, Macrinus deserted this battle, ran away from the war zone that he had called home for 5 years and where he had ascended to the throne, ran away from the war zone controlled by the Roman military that once loved him and now wanted to kill him. Macrinus ran away from the war zone towards Rome, where his emperor title had been recognized and where he would be safe. Macrinus, the Roman emperor, fled to Rome, the city he actually never set foot in, and never would. Even though Macrinus shaved his head, shaved his beard, dressed like a poor beggar in rags while traveling, the military men who hunted him tracked him down, and someday in June 218, at age 54, Macrinus was captured and later beheaded. Emperor Macrinus was overthrown and killed by a 14-year-old boy who kept his head as a trophy. 14-year-old Elagabalus, who essentially owed his entire rise to power to a desperate Macrinus deifying Caracalla, the man Macrinus killed and took the throne from. And that's what I call a messed up circle of life. And thus ends the story of Emperor Macrinus.